No, no, no. You find here. What you?
Oh, I see there. 翻译过。
So, on behalf of the Tibet Policy Institute and on behalf of all of us who are gathered here, it is my immense pleasure and privilege to welcome Mr. Ho Ping, Mr. Wang Huang, and Professor Ming Sha. As I had the opportunity to express you the other day, the Tibetan struggle is not anti-China, nor anti-Chinese people. The Tibetan people's struggle is against the wrong policies which the Chinese Communist Party implements and carries out in Tibet. And your presence here is a source of huge encouragement for us, and we thank you for your support, solidarity, and encouragement. And now I would like to request my colleague, Mr. Kunkatashi, to introduce our three very good friends and very distinguished scholars.
Kamaliya President, on Shishima, on Gado, and the Jubilee Hanshida, Tayanshi, Juwalia, Shushan, and Lamosoria. Yet, Consumta, Sani Chicken, Shide, Lupu, anything in Tabini, the Tana, yet, those who are concentrated and we come out Chief Ari from New York, Chief Norman, and before the Chief Chicago show. And then, the area, the Zodi, and the Confusion, she did the Ghana, and not much from the Sunny, the leader of Cambodia, and the Venia, the William Town, they are not chasing them on the Yahweh, and the very much in Magoyo, and Yimane, Chava Sumji, the Dante, and the Town, the table, the Zodi. And Tana, Kudu, Jiangshu, Sunny, and Yasho, Kanasha, and here's about the Sidu Chikanda, Tango, Kamana, and Kuna, Sidu Chikandi, Yamshil to Jana, Dana to the Teshka, Toto, Kudu, Navi, Chandante, Mr. Herping, Chasham, Yunum Puti, Jana, Mizu, Yunanita, and Tabato, the Minjing Jikas, Gamble, the Mancheri, and Sochi should be. Yanal Julia Nishina, that's how I know cool Subatina, and Pashurity Kravio, Mr. Hervey. And how the interior, Jessica, the Congress, Brani, Chicago, you have any address in the New York Times, nowadays, Egypt and Sarana, and Hervey, Jimmy Hervey, Howling, even Janan, Yahoo, and the building gave you the style of the Koran. And Jordan Minsa, usually don't hear to the and Jamaica, the one Mammy New York City University, Chelsea, Florida, and the Hampton Professor. Today, we Konami, the Java, Mincha, and the one Todi, Masters of the Todi, Yubutan, and Tele, Japan, Putin, and not to Kalchima, Mauritius, and the mounted my engineer, and chief, and the easy to
Congratulations, thank you so much. So, in terms of division of time, we will request Mr. Herping to speak for 20 minutes, and Mr. Wang Huo will translate. And Professor Ming Sha, you have 20 minutes, and the rest of the remaining time we'll involve in a question-answer session. Thank you. So I would like to invite, first of all, Mr. Herping to give your insights into Chinese politics. Here you go.
大家下午好。
Good afternoon, everyone.
我在这里不是来演讲的，我是向大家表示敬意。
I'm not here actually to give a lecture. I just come here as a learning trip and then to salute your good work.
500年以后，我们会想到你们这些人不只是一个流亡者，而且更重要的是，你们把你们的文化和思想的种子撒向了世界各地。
I think after 500 years, when we look back, we'll notice that we'll see that all of you have done great contributions, not as exiled government or refugees, but to spread Tibetan culture all over the world. I think that's really important.
我这几天见到了这个我们的司政，我感觉到他就是这样一个世界的领袖。但是很可惜，我说，如果有一天中国民主化了，你会不会到中国去竞选这个总统啊？他说不会，他只会为藏人服务。
During the past 2 days, we have met a lot of people, including Sejong. When I saw him, I said he acted like international leader. So I posed him the question. I said, "Are you willing to run for office in mainland China someday?" And then he said, "No, no, no. All I want is to work for Tibetans."
他是我见到的香港的、台湾的、中国大陆的政治领袖更聪明、更有智慧、更有思想、更有才华。
He's one of the most talented, most thoughtful, and most charismatic leaders I've met. I've met a lot of them from Hong Kong, mainland China, and Taiwan. I think he's one of the best.
今天上午我非常荣幸的觐见了达赖喇嘛尊者。
This morning, I had the opportunity and the honor to meet with His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
我们讨论了川普的总统，讨论了这个达赖喇嘛尊者讲了很多的思想。
His Holiness shared a lot of his thoughts with us, including international politics, about his ideas regarding China, and also even U.S. politics.
川普总统每天讲的都是美国第一，美国第一，美国第一。
继续讲。
这个达赖喇嘛尊者讲的是世界的问题、精神的问题。
So there was a sharp contrast. Well, in the United States, we hear Donald Trump talk about America first, America first, America first, but His Holiness talks about the world and the world in general. So I'm very impressed.
这就是一个差别，因为川普只是美国的总统，而达赖喇嘛尊者是世界的领袖。
That's the difference. I told His Holiness. I said, Donald Trump is the president of the United States, but His Holiness is the leader of the world.
所以我为你们感觉到很荣幸，有这么聪明的、智慧的这个司政，也有这么一个世界级的领袖达赖喇嘛尊者。
So I think it's a great pride, and also it's very lucky, fortunate for all of you here to have such a great spiritual leader and such a charismatic civil leader like the Sejong.
28年以前，我第一次见到达赖喇嘛尊者的时候，我才知道第18尊张国华、张金武。
28 years ago, when I was in Toronto, I had the opportunity to meet with His Holiness, and it was His Holiness who told me a lot about China, about
18尊。
the 18th military group and a lot of the military leaders.
我们今天本来是很短的时间，结果我们谈了很长。
The meeting this morning was intended for 15 minutes. We ended up about 45 minutes.
我发现他比我还了解中国。
His Holiness seems to know more about China than I do.
所以我们约了明天又继续谈一次。
So we decided to have another conversation tomorrow.
所以我都不知道有什么要跟你们讲的，你们有这么好的资政和这个达赖喇嘛尊者。
In a way, I don't know what to share with you because you have such two remarkable leaders who know so much about China.
我们知道，就是过去一些年，这个中国和世界都产生了非常大的变化。
继续讲。Sorry， 继续讲。过去的。
就是过去几十年，中国突然变得非常的强大。
As we all know, during the past several decades, and the world has so many changes, and China has emerged as such a powerful country.
我们绝对没有想到一个64的屠杀学生和市民的政府，变成了全世界最有钱的政府。
Nobody would have imagined that the government that cracked down on students' movement in 1989 would turn to such a wealthy, powerful nation.
现在全世界几乎所有的国家都在向中国共产党妥协。
It looks like right now, all the Western governments, or the governments around the world, they try to succumb to China's temptation and succumb to the temptation of money.
包括美国、英国、法国、德国，几乎所有的国家，他们开始放弃自己的人权，放弃自己的自由，放弃自己的法律。
Right now, looks the United States, Germany, France, the UK, and all the Western democracies, they seem to give up their values of freedom and democracy and for the sake of money.
不仅是政府是这样，这个公司是这样，大学也是这样，甚至研究机构也是这样。
We see a lot of these incidents not only from the governments or big corporations. Right now, we can see that a lot of the universities or academic institutions, even some NGOs, they are following the example and then the Chinese government is trying to buy them off.
所以昨天我跟研究所的这个很多很聪明的这个同事来讨论中国的问题。
That's why yesterday it was very productive to talk with the talented scholars of the TPI.
我说他们所看到的西方的报纸，我们曾经非常尊敬的这些报纸，只有很少很少的报纸在讲真话，大部分的报纸已经讲的都是假话，关于中国的。
And also, when you read the Western media, their coverage about China, you'll see that more and more the coverage is very superficial and some of them not really true.
超过100人西藏人的自焚，这样的一个非常令人震撼的事情，在西方没有引起非常非常大的反响，就是一个证明。
For example, let me give you an example. The self-immolation, about more than 100 people died for free Tibet. But we'll know that we don't see a lot of coverage in the Western media.
所以我在前年的美国国会讲，现在人类面临一个最大的一次挑战。
Several years ago, when I testified at the U.S. Congress, I told the U.S. congressman saying that we're facing a huge, tremendous challenge.
比这个希特勒的第2次世界大战，比斯大林的冷战还要来得严重。
I think it's more, the consequences will be graver, more than the Second World War or Hitler's China or Stalin's Soviet Union.
以前的法西斯德国、意大利和日本，他们需要一个一个国家去用兵器和战争去征服，是很艰难的一个事情。
During World War II, for fascist countries like Japan, Italy, and Germany, when they wanted to conquer a country, they had to do it one by one through conventional wars.
而冷战的时候，有一个柏林墙把中方和西方给分开了。
During Cold War, there was a Berlin Wall that separated the East and the West.
但是今天中国共产党他没有改变他的政策，没有改变他的政府，没有改变他的行为，甚至比过去还要更糟糕。但是因为他们有钱，可以走到世界上任何的地方。
Nowadays, the Chinese Communist Party, they can go anywhere and buy off a lot of the government entities without changing anything, all because of money.
他们中国共产党的领导人习近平比美国的总统、比英国的女皇、比这个德国的总理还要被人欢迎。
In a way, the Chinese president, when he visited other countries, he seemed to be more popular than the Queen of England or the Angela Merkel in Germany or another president of a certain country I didn't hear.
这种只是追求经济的发展，而不追求这个人权和自由的这种方式，我把它命名为一种中国的病毒。
Right now, there's the called China model is the way that you seek economic development. The economic development tops everything, and you can sacrifice your basic human or moral values. So I call this China model the China virus.
这种病毒已经侵蚀到了西方的几乎所有的国家。
I can see that the China virus is now attacking a lot of the Western institutions.
它现在已经把非洲变成了中国的一种殖民地。
For example, if you look at Africa, Africa is almost like another Chinese colony.
过去很长时间，美国和西方国家对非洲的承诺和援助只是吹牛，并没有真实的落实在现实中间。而中国现在实际上已经控制了非洲。
In the past, Western countries like the United States, they talked a lot about aid to Africa, but they really didn't do much. And nowadays in China, actually, they are using money and then control a lot of many parts of Africa.
现在有300万人到500万人的中国人在非洲经商然后掠夺非洲的资源，然后去影响西方的这个非洲的政策。
Right now, there are about 3 to 5 million Chinese living in Africa. They either doing business there or they are doing other stuff, but they are right now robbing Africa of its resources.
南美洲也差不多。最近台湾最重要的邦交国巴拿马，也是美国最重要的一个后院，在这个南美，也和中国建交了。
The same thing is happening in South America. For example, Panama used to be the backyard of the United States, was a close ally of Taiwan, but recently it just severed its ties with Taiwan and normalized relationship with the PRC.
亚洲国家受的这个冲击就更加严重。
As you can see, 8 countries in Asia, they're probably the most affected.
如果有一个国家希望跟中国的关系不好的时候，中国只要用一个很简单的方式，我不让我的游客来买东西就可以了，我不来旅游就可以了。
As you can see, you have read a lot of the incidents lately. If any of the Asian countries they show some hostility towards China, or they are construed as being unfriendly towards China, there's only one thing the Chinese government does. They will stop tourists from going to that country, and it causes a lot of the drop in the tourism industry. That is very devastating.
我从来没有这样想过，西方的民主价值和它的法律和它的政治为什么如此的脆弱包括它的西方的学术、大学的教育，为什么会变得只要有钱就可以把它收买？
I'd never imagined that the Western governments or the Western institutions they could become more vulnerable. They can be so easily bought off with money.
世界的末日真的到了吗？
Sometimes I wonder whether the end of the world is coming.
我们现在回到中国去看，又完全不一样的世界。
But if you look at China, it seems to be a completely different world.
我见到很多的亿万富翁，我见到很多的官员，我也见到很多的知识分子和普通的中国人。
In New York, where I live, I have the opportunity to talk with a lot of businessmen, billionaires, intellectuals, or people from all walks of life.
他们有了钱，有了权，在全世界各地都是很猖狂。
Some of the people, they're very wealthy, and with money, they actually do a lot of things in the West. They can do anything they want in many parts of the world.
但是他们看不到中国的未来。
But even though they have a lot of money, when you talk with them, they don't see a future for China.
每个人都没有安全感。
Nobody feels secure in China.
不管你有多少钱，或者还是有多大的权利，还是多大的名声，随时都有可能进入监狱。
No matter how much money you have and how famous you are, or how much power you have, and you could end up in jail anytime.
更重要的是，他们的内心世界的恐慌和精神的空虚。
Most importantly, they're very empty spiritually. They don't have any spiritual pursuit.
你们都知道宗教的自由在中国是被压制的、被控制的。
As you all know, that religious freedom is just mere talk in China.
但是无数的人现在在偷偷的这个信仰何等宗教。
But a lot of people, they are seeking different types of religions secretly in private.
中国共产党有9000万共产党员，但是信佛教的人超过了这个数字，超过了这个中国共产党党员的数字。
There are 90 million Communist Party members in China, but more people are Buddhists in China than the actual number of the Communist Party.
这就是给了佛教，给了藏传佛教来填补中国人精神世界的一个机会。
Maybe that will give Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism the opportunity to fill the void.
所以我的意思是，你们不要只是把你们的种子撒到世界各地，别忘了要撒到中国。
So when you spread Tibetan cultures around other parts of the world, don't forget that China is your main target.
另外一个更重要的现实的问题，就是中国共产党并没有解决一个基本上的权利的公平的选举、公平的产生。
So another very realistic question is, even though China is very powerful, but they have one very vulnerable point. That is, the Communist Party has not resolved the institutional change of power, the peaceful transition of power, and the fair share of power.
1949年以来，他们所有的这个问题，所有的斗争都是围绕着权力。
That's why after 1949, all the major political upheavals centered around the power transition.
60年过去了，现在到了这一次下个星期三就要开的19大，也没有解决这个问题。
60 years have passed. Now we're approaching the 19th Party Congress, and this issue still remains unresolved.
它像一个巨大的黑箱，
This is like a big black box.
那不知道会放出什么样的魔鬼。
So we don't know what kind of devils they're going to release.
那么这样的话，使中国的这个政治人员没办法走向现代的文明。
This very issue, if it remains unresolved, that prevents China from entering a very civilized political world.
所以这就出现了一个相反的方向发展。一方面，中国的力量在全世界变得很强大，但是另一方面，在中国它并没有解决安全的问题。
So because of this issue, we see a paradox here. The paradoxical situation is, on the one hand, China is becoming very, very economically powerful. But then on the other hand, within China, there is this political uncertainty, and that's why nobody feels safe.
也许我们什么都不要做，中国共产党自己有一天它就自己爆炸了。
Because of this paradox, it means that maybe sometimes we don't need to do anything. China, the Communist Party, will implode itself.
然后在这个时候，在世界各地的本来要发作的中国病毒，可能也又消失了。
And if this happens, which means the virus which is now attacking all the different institutions in the world, they might be wiped out as well.
所以有时候我觉得我们能做什么呢？
Sometimes we wonder what we can do.
也许我们只要把身体锻炼好就可以了。
Sometimes I will tell people, as long as you remain healthy and just wait for the Communist Party to implode and kill itself.
突然有一天中国就变了。
Nobody knows that someday when we wake up, the world has changed.
每一天每一刻可能都会变化。
The changes are occurring. It could take place anytime.
我讲的就这一些吧。真正的有学问的是夏明教授。
We'll turn to him. He will be Professor Xia will give you more detailed analysis.
你们等一下所有的难题都交给夏明教授。
是吗？
所有的难题，所有的问题。
You can direct all your difficult questions to Professor.
Okay, thank you. And you know, He Ping, and he is really the great source of all kinds of information. And many they are, say, privileged information because he has some great access. And so, but in the previous discussion, he sounds more professorial than I am, and because he really did not share with us some intimate, detailed information, and he was more, you see, grandiose. And but since I was told and I should talk about something about the 19th Party Congress, right? So this I think I should cover not only the long-term development but also the 19th Party Congress. And first, as He Ping has explained, at this moment, the whole world basically has been powered by the China model. And many people, many scholars, or many business people, I think they have lost their nerve and to try to say no, or to stand up, or to maintain their fundamental value. And many people, they have sold out their values and in exchange for the monetary values from the Chinese government. And the person I always want to say publicly shame and name and include, you see, Henry Kissinger and Henry Paulson. And of course, they are, you see, cut from the same cloth. So if you look at how they have written books to underwrite the greatness or the effective leadership of the Chinese government, and so you can understand why the Chinese system has become so powerful and so difficult for us to combat. And because there is a pipeline and connecting Zhongnanhai with Wall Street. And so this is why the Chinese government for the past several years or several decades, and they have draw tremendous resources not only from the Chinese people, but also from the global capital. but also global capital by utilizing the Chinese government as a conduit, and they also have drawn tremendous value and resources from the Chinese economy. And so what I want to do is, I want to say one important thing. The Chinese government, I think, at this moment looks very formidable. But I think the implosion of the Chinese system, I think, I'm more optimistic, I think, is within sight. Why I say that? Because first I want to say the decline of the Chinese system actually started in the year 2008. And because in 2008 you can find all the seeds of destruction, and they were buried then. And we can just name from the first month, the snow disaster, and so how the Chinese infrastructure revealed their vulnerability. And because of snow, and so the whole national railway system was paralyzed. Then we can find in May, and the Sichuan earthquake, such a big is a natural disaster, and so this calamity and really disrupted Chinese economy, and also used a lot of resources to help the people there. And so this is why I think that year the Chinese economy really made some difficulties. Then if we continue, and so we saw the Olympic Games. And the Olympic Games, and we all know, and every country, if they host Olympic game, and usually there will be Olympic, say, the post-Olympic economic crisis. And so this is how you can see and how Australia or Greece and all they have the same phenomena. And we cannot say China escaped it, because actually in the 2007, China already started economic recession, especially the exports, you see, started to decline. And so then you can continue, you can find Olympic game, and really that was a very wasteful project. But of course, the Chinese government continued to burn money from Olympic game to the World Expo and to the Asian Games. So this is how I think this is another state of destruction. Then if we continue, and we can find the melamine poisoned milk crisis. So the children, they drink the Chinese milk and powder milk, and so thousands of them, they got sick, and some people, they were even killed. Right? So you can find the Chinese consumers, the Chinese middle class people, really they have lost confidence in the quality of Chinese products and for their own children. And then we continue, we saw in October, Bo Xilai, and he became the party secretary in Chongqing. And so, to some extent, he introduced this ultra-leftism to challenge the central political position occupied by Hu Jintao. And you can find the power struggle continued until today. Because Bo Xilai was a challenger towards Xi Jinping. But Xi Jinping was more a dark horse. And because we know, and not only Bo Xilai was positioning himself, but also another Hu Jintao's the favorite, and we know what's his name? Lin Jihua, and also was involved in this big power struggle. So today, and you can see the continuity. Then we continue, and we get into November, and Liu Xiaobo started Charter an 08 movement. And I also want to point out, and I was one of the first 2,000 of signers overseas. So we started this Charter 08 movement, and when Liu Xiaobo collected about 300 people, and for the first group of signers, and for this charter, and so in overseas, and led by Professor Yu Yinshi, so there were 2,000 Chinese scholars, and we also signed the charter. So if we look at this whole year, and all kinds of future developments actually can be seen, and in the year 2008. And so that's how I think if someday the Chinese economic system is going to implode, and I think and we can find different seeds, right? And if we look at the year 2008. But the most important thing is in the year 2008 and then continue, because there was one big issue is the financial crisis. And we know in September, and Lehman Brothers collapsed, and so the financial crisis broke out. That was the biggest global financial crisis after the Great Depression. And if we look at the loss of the banks and their assets, actually it was even bigger than the 1929 Great Depression. So because of this global financial crisis, the Chinese government really went to panic. And therefore, they infused tremendous amount of money. And first, they talk about 4 trillion Chinese yuan. Then, and they mobilized local governments and the money and the bank. So we are talking about 20 trillion Chinese yuan, and they were used and to salvage the Chinese economy and in crisis. And so you can find, because of the huge infusion of money, and so the Chinese economy and did not get into big recession. And so in the year 2010 and 2011, and it reached the growth rate 11 or 13. But that was the injection of one big shot in the arm. And then you can find that from the year 2013, the Chinese economy has been on the skid until today. Every year there's one grade of drop. And so you can find and the Chinese economy dropped from 9% to 8% to 7%, now it's 6%. And also I anticipate the Chinese economic slowdown is not cyclical. It's not after 5 years then it's going to move back out of the cycle, but it's more structural. So therefore, and we can see China has entered a long-term economic decline. And also this economic decline, and I can say it has multiple paradoxes and multiple dilemmas. And because not only the Chinese, the population is growing, and so the old age population, and also the Chinese, demographic dividend was over. And so this is how, and the Chinese overall labor force in the percentage of the total population and has already passed the peak time. And even the Chinese absolute labor force is going to start to decline, to shrink in the coming about 5 some years. So this is how we can find is demographic crisis. And another important thing is, not only the Chinese economy is stagnant, even it is around 6%, but based upon the Chinese economist their observation, 6% is very low. Why the Chinese government always wanted to guarantee 8%? That was a mantra for the Chinese leaders. One important reason is because only at 8%, the Chinese government they could maintain a stable revenue and for their budget. And also they could maintain the sizable economy for employment. And you can find, and there's one example is in the year 2009, when the Chinese economy started shrinking. And the big problem was, and the government revenue shrank even more than the economic in the slowdown. So basically the Chinese government, the revenue, the budget is more vulnerable to a slowdown economy than any other sectors. So this is why I think for the Chinese government, one big issue is, and they used to have money to throw money at the problem. But at this moment, I think, and they are facing a shrinking resources. I always say, and Xi Jinping, and he got the syndrome of Alice. I don't know whether you have read Alice in Wonderland. When Alice ate a mushroom, and suddenly he got the power and he exploded. He became very, bigger and bigger, very powerful. Then he talked, in a very aggressive way to the queen. But then she did not realize, and the magic of the mushroom disappeared. But she still keeps that kind of aggressive, arrogant tone towards the queen. And I think, and Xi Jinping, at this moment, he's not aware, and his magic already has disappeared. But he is not aware. So he's continuing to talk in an arrogant, aggressive way to the world and to his people. So this is why I think he got this Alice and mushroom syndrome. And so now, for the Chinese government, if their legitimacy for a long time has been performance-based, so now the Chinese economic slowdown is a big crisis for their legitimacy. And one important thing is this. Can you hear? I think is it working?
Yes.
Okay, good. And also, one important thing I want to say is because for the Chinese government, and not only the legitimacy is a big issue, but also the confidence, and also their self-confidence is being undermined because of the decline of the economy. And also I think Xi Jinping, and for the past 5 years, he got the biggest failure has been that the economy has not helped him. And also Xi Jinping tried to create some pet projects in order to show his leadership over the economy, but he has failed miserably. I can give you 3 examples. One example was his handling of the stock market crash in the year 2015. And since that moment, and he told people, and he said, yeah, the Chinese stock market changed from 3,000 to 5,000 and hitting 6,000. And so then he said, yeah, it's going to go to 8,000. Eventually it's going to get into 10,000. But actually, in the summer, and in June and July, the Chinese stock market lost almost 30%. And so, for any economist, that is a financial or economic crisis. But of course, the Chinese government would not say we got into a big economic crisis. What did they do? Xi Jinping made the second mistake. On the one hand, he basically shut down the stock market, and he banned the exchange, and he banned the sales, and he started arresting a lot of people, and he even sent the Deputy Minister of Public Security and to be stationed in the China Security Commission. So you can find how the public security is trumped the securities of the stock market. And so this is how, and you can find Xi Jinping with just one single action, he destroyed both the rudimentary market economy in China and he threw out the rule of law. So this was his big disaster and he created. And why it is important? Because he has lost credibility in the eyes of Western investors and also in the eyes of Chinese entrepreneurs. This is why you can find at this moment and all countries and the big players, European Union, Japan, and the United States, all they have refused to recognize, to acknowledge China's market economy status. And also you can find all the big rating agencies and Standard & Poor's or Fitch, and so they have all downgraded the Chinese national grade here. And so you can find, and it has made it more difficult for the Chinese economy or economic actors or Chinese sovereign banks and to raise money and fund in the global market. So this was very bad. And so then there was another important thing and Xi Jinping and he proposed, and he talked about 2 birds theory. One bird was, and he said, we are going to change the cage, and then we are going to 腾笼换鸟. So we are going to introduce new bird. What does he mean? He means we are going to get rid of low-end manufacturing. We are going to move on and to get into more capital-intensive or high-value adding industries. But was it possible? One important thing is because the Chinese is labor, and especially for the past 3 decades, we are talking about several hundred millions of migrant laborers. They were abusively used, and then they were never given the opportunity to improve their skill and to get education. Once they were used, and then they were thrown out and thrashed out and then pushed back into the countryside. What does that mean? 2 consequences. One, it means and in China, and when you look at the countryside, you still have 60-some% of people that are still in countryside. And many people said, okay, and the countryside is going to continue to provide cheap labor, but actually it's not. Why? Because of the Chinese residential policy and the hukou. And because of the residential policy, a lot of migrant workers, they moved into the cities after they were used, and in an abusive way, they were thrown out and pushed back into the countryside. Therefore, the people in the countryside, they are not the fresh labor which could be used, does that make sense? Already they were used up. So this is one big issue. And the second, so basically the Louis is a turning point and already has happened in China. Second important thing is because the Chinese migrant laborers, not only they were not given education, because they were not given the equal treatment as an urban resident in the cities, and also their children were wasted. And because their children were struggling, and at least 30 million children, they could not live with their parents. Therefore, they did not get a good education. Even their psychological status and health was damaged. So this is how, and this is the big issue. And in China, the labor does not have the quality to follow the so-called change the cage, and then we're going to get new bird. and high-tech or high-value ME industries. Second, you can find Xi Jinping talk about 凤凰涅槃 or the rebirth of phoenix, so another birth. But the problem is, as I said, and if after 2008, the Chinese economy and especially the Chinese leadership has destroyed the confidence from the global and the investment world. And the Chinese entrepreneurs, and they are running away because the Chinese government already has arrested a lot of very famous entrepreneurs. So Guo Wengui now is running, and Xiao Jianhua was arrested and kidnapped in Hong Kong and brought back to China because Xi Jinping believed there was a financial coup against him, and so his competitors tried to use finance as a weapon. So this is how you can find Xi Jinping try to control the economy. And then we can find Kai-Sin Li Jiacheng from Hong Kong already, and short sale and his properties and in China. And so these are basically many things, and we can talk about. I don't have time to list. So what it means, Xi Jinping, and he cannot really implement his so-called two birds theory. So he got a big trouble. The third, and his initiative is One Belt, One Road. One Belt, One Road, I just want to mention from the start, from the very beginning, and he could not overcome the geopolitical security crisis and obstacles. Look at Xinjiang, that's the beginning of the One Belt. Xinjiang today is under de facto military rule, under martial law. And you can find Xinjiang and is even being abused, and more severely than Tibet in some way. Because basically the Chinese security force or army, they could openly kill the Uyghurs, the Muslims, without any warning. So this is how, and it is under state-sponsored terrorism. So if we look at the one road, the start point, that is Fujian. And Fujian, the cross-strait relationship has deteriorated. And the Chinese leaders, they have talked about maybe there will be an imminent war and to liberate Taiwan. So this is basically the One Belt, One Road initiative. I have no reason to believe it's going to succeed. Especially the Chinese government and got into the places, either they are very corrupt, or they are very unstable, or they are dominated by Muslims. So the Chinese Muslim conflict and can be a big concern, or they don't have the credit worthiness. It means in the eyes of global rating agencies, none of them and is going to give you return, and if you put huge amount of money. I just give you one simple example is, because the One Belt, One Road initiative includes about 64 countries, and so reach Latin America and Africa. And the China Development Bank and put, since the year 2009, put $40 billion into Venezuela. Where is Venezuela today? Venezuela economy and is, gone. And so the people there, they're running away. And so this is how, this is one typical example you can find. The One Belt and One Initiative is going to have the same kind of scenario. Okay, so to summarize, and the economic multi-predicament or multiple paradoxes. And one big issue is the Chinese government has no money to deal with the forthcoming crisis. Because you think the Chinese government is very rich, but you have to keep in mind the Chinese national economy, the size of the Chinese national economy is about, $12 trillion. So it's about 70 or 80 trillion Chinese yuan. But if you think about what's the debt level in today's China, in China the total debt is, if you look at the debt over the Chinese GDP, according to the Chinese own number, and the last year it has already reached more than 230%. And then if you use McKinsey and the assessment, it has reached more than 270%. So that's a big debt. Right? So the state-owned enterprises, and they are a big money-losing sector. And then if you also look at the local governments, they have lost any hard budget constraint. So because of the soft budget constraint, so the banks and the state-owned enterprises and the local governments, they have become the three sources of Chinese, you see, the monetary leading. And because they are all passing the buck to the central government, they are overdrafting the credibility from the central government. Right, so then if we look at some other issues, if you look at the Chinese government has sponsored so many overseas projects, if you look at the Chinese government has you see, borrowed bonds and running budget deficit, and so this is how, and I don't think the Chinese government and is able to deal with a lot of you see, crisis and when the money and is needed. Right, so this is how I want to say, because of this big background, today in China, the power struggle, especially if we look at the 19th Party Congress, and I think for the past 5 years, Xi Jinping, and he tried to consolidate this position, but he has you see, several challenges. First, he tried to control the gun, right, the gun barrel, and so in Chinese 叫坐稳位置，那么要抓好刀把子 gun barrel, and he controlled gun barrel to some extent. So he purged, you see, and now people say that more than 100 you see, retired or active generals. Then he tried to control the dagger. In Chinese, it's the 刀把子. That means the security force and the police and the state security. But has he controlled? So if we look at the Guo Wengui's case, right? If you look at Meng Jianzhu, right? If you look at the security force, to some extent, when Guo Wengui said how Meng Jianzhu tried to control everyone, tried to spy on his wife and his and the family members, so it means and he has not completely purged Zhou Yongkang's and the remnants. This is one important reason why Sun Zhencai was purged in Chongqing, because one accusation was Sun Zhencai did not work hard enough to purge the legacy and from Bo Xilai and Zhou Yongkang in Chongqing. So that's a big problem. Now, and they facing the shrinking budget, and so now they are fighting for the purse string. Now the problem is China has already entered the oligarchic state. So the top leaders, they control different industries. So now when you try to control the purse string, basically all the big top leaders, they are trying to steal from each other. So this is how, and the power struggle not only is for the position anymore, not only is for the gun barrel, not only is for the control of the dagger, but also is to control the purse string. So they are trying to steal money from each other. If your family, your son-in-law controls banking industry, then I want to get it. So maybe I want to control insurance industry. Maybe your children, they control the mining industry. My child wants to control the energy industry. So this is how you can find today the Chinese top leaders, their power struggle has become so complicated. One important reason is because they are fighting over the purse string, because of the shrinking part. So now, if I have said all this, so one important thing is what's been going on in for the 19th Party Congress. First, I think for Xi Jinping, and if he wants to consolidate the power, he has to control the Central Committee. How could he do that? And one important reason he has to control the Central Committee is because in the Chinese political system, the Central Committee is the so-called selectorate. Because the 200-some members, they are going to vote and for the Politburo and for the Standing Committee. And therefore, and Xi Jinping for the past 2 years, and he has, and his supporters, they have worked so hard to promote their own loyalists. Because in China, there's a bureaucratic requirement. You cannot get 2 steps promotion within 2 years. So every 2 years, you can get only 1 step of promotion. For example, a classmate of mine, Lin Shangli, and he was the vice president for my university, and I once worked and in 1989 to 1991 at Fudan University. So he was vice president, so basically that was at the bureau level. So now he has been promoted to be the general secretary for the Chinese Political Studies Office. Basically that was the assistant to Wang Hunying. And so you can find for the past 2 years, and he got promoted to the vice ministerial level. But he was given the so-called 待遇, the treatment as a minister. And so now, and they try to promote people like that. And you can find many people, they were promoted to the provincial level governor, especially because Xi Jinping has difficulty to control the central bureaucracy. So most likely his people, they were promoted from Fujian or Zhejiang, but allocated to some other provinces to reach the governor level. So this is what he's trying to do to make sure, and within the central committee, he can control several big blocks. Some blocks he cannot control, like as I said, central government bureaucracy. But he absolutely wants to control the provincial bloc. He wants to control the military bloc. And so this is how Xi Jinping and is, you see, busy in doing all this. And I said, because Xi Jinping has, you see, failed in the economy, so his credential, his credibility, his legitimacy have all been weakened. So at this moment, there has been a big power struggle. And so many people really want to hold Xi Jinping accountable and for the, you see, the problems. So this is why, of course, and I don't anticipate Xi Jinping is going to be removed. But Xi Jinping is, you see, under hit at this moment. And because he has not turned the Chinese economy around. Under his watch, the Chinese economy has become from the bad to the worse. So this is what's going on. So basically, to wrap up, and I don't share the optimism and many people want us to believe. Because when many people, like the University of Chicago professor Fogel, he said, because Wen Guang and is from University of Chicago, he said in the year 2040, Chinese economy and is going to account for more than, let's say, 40-some% of the global economy. The Chinese GDP per capita will be more than $80,000. And that moment, and the French, they are going to be poor people in the eyes of Chinese urban residents. I think that's pure nonsense. And I said, Henry Kissinger, Henry Paulson, they have published a lot of books to underwrite the Chinese model. Why? Because the Chinese government has spent tremendous amount of money to hire a lot of people to pay for all this publicity and propaganda. Why they need it? Because they are desperate. Therefore, I hope we are not going to be deceived by a lot of big talks by the famous people and without soul. And so this is why I think, and He Ping just said, yeah, we should keep our optimism, but I don't think we should do nothing. Of course, we should do many things. And even we can put the last straw on the camel's back, that's great. And also, I think one big question is, and if the Chinese system is going to collapse, what's next? What we should do? So how should we be prepared? And so I should stop here, and thank you.
Mr. He Ping, Professor Mingsha, and Wenhua, thank you very much for sharing all these important information with us. And now I would like to invite the audience to engage our distinguished scholars on intensive discussion. And when you ask your questions, keep it short, brief, and simple. And before asking your question, please introduce yourself, your name, your office, or your organization. Thank you.
I guess you have covered everything. There's nothing extra. Yeah, I think that.
I have a question. I would like to get your thoughts. There's a rumor going around that Xi Jinping will, just stay over more than his 10-year term. Do you think this is an accurate rumor for you and for Professor Mingsha?
我把中国的英国有一个科学家他说这个人类的现在的科学的发展，有一天人工智能会制造机器人，这个机器人本来是为人类服务的，这个后来机器人不断的升级，然后控制了人类。
To answer this question, let me say something about Steve Hawkins, the British scientist who once predicted that the robots that human invented to help us make things easier, life easier. But one of these days, the robot is going to destroy humanity.
我最近提出了一个政治学的概念，或者是一个我的观察。我认为，其实这个机器已经在中国制造出来了。
So lately, I have found that this type of political robots are being created in China.
中国共产党就制造了这么一个政治的机器，在中国叫组织，或者我们有的时候叫体制，但实际上它是一个政治的机器。
Oftentimes in the Communist Party, those who are familiar with China, this place is called 组织 or organization or institution, but in fact, it is the political system.
如果你有权利，可以利用这个机器来干很多很多的坏的事情。
When you are in power, you can use the machine to do a lot of things for yourself.
但是你稍微不小心，这个机器就会把你吃掉。
But on the other hand, if you are not careful enough, if you don't tread carefully, you could be swallowed by this machine or the system.
现在很多的中国人，包括西方的学者，包括西方的政治人物，都是把习近平讲得很强大，好像是毛泽东第二。
Right now, a lot of Western scholars or Western media outlets, they have described or depicted Xi Jinping as somebody very, very powerful. They think he's Chairman Mao II.
这完全不是事实。
I don't think this is the truth.
因为习近平所有周围的人都是别人的。
Because all the people who are surrounding him, they are not his loyalists.
因为所有的官员，包括他身边的官员，都需要按照一个一个的级别被提升起来。
Because all of the people around him, they were promoted from the grassroots gradually up to the upper echelon.
就算是现在他所用的浙江和福建的官员，大部分都不是他真正培养的。
Even though he promoted a lot of people from Fujian or Zhejiang, those two provinces where he used to work, these officials were not actually his personal loyalists because he did not nurture them personally.
西方和的学术界把这个中国分成两个派系，甲和乙，事实上也不是正确的。
Sometimes Western scholars they divide the Chinese upper echelon into two different factions, A and B. I don't think that's accurate as well.
中国的政治派系有无数的个，有江泽民，有胡锦涛，有很多的人。
There are so many political factions within the Communist Party, such as one led by Hu Jintao, some people say led by Jiang Zemin or by somebody else.
因为他们共同制造了这个机器。
They all contribute to the making of this political machine.
它是个政治的机器，又是个杀人的机器。
It is a political machine, but it also can be a killer machine.
所以我认为习近平要改造这个机器，实际上是非常困难的。事实上，在这5年来，他其实只做了一件事情，就改造把军队的将军调来调去。
I think it is a tremendous challenge for Xi Jinping to reform this machine, to make some changes. And during the past 5 years, we will see that the only thing has made changes was to try to control the military.
因为他根本不知道这个将军谁是他的敌人，谁是有一天会把他暗杀，谁是会产生政变。
Because he has no idea who the generals are, who they pledge support to, or which generals is going to stage a coup someday.
以前的一个将军在一个职位上一般是待5年。但是现在呢，1年就可能待3个地方。
So in the past, one general you can be stationed at a place for 3 or 5 years, but now they change constantly. Sometimes a general can probably change 2 or 3 different places within a year.
习近平为什么会要动军队呢？是因为他知道这个军队不需要打仗。
Why does he pay so much attention to reforming the military? Because he knows that the existence of the military in China right now is not to stage a war, but mostly to
他也打不了仗。
to intimidate your opponents because they are not capable enough of staging a war.
它既不会发生中国和印度的战争，也不会在南海和日本南海和美国、东海和日本去发生战争。
So when you read about the reports about the tension between China and India, about China's military control of or military dominance in the South China Sea, so that's pure political posturing.
2天以前，美国的一个智库说中国解放军会攻打台湾，这纯属是美国人不了解中国。
Last week, there was an American think tank saying that China might be poised to use force against Taiwan. I think that's pure heresy.
所以我回答这个先生的问题，就是习近平他会成为毛泽东第2吗？不可能。
So in response to your question, will Xi Jinping become Mao the second and then continue to hold on to power? I don't think it is a possibility.
因为这个政治机制不允许他。
Because the political machine is so powerful, they will constrain him.
除非他把这个政治体制把它干掉。
Of course, unless he abolished the whole system.
Thank you.
Yeah, my simple answer for this is I think Xi Jinping and he wants to stay on forever, and because he's emulating Russian President Putin, and he is moving the power center away from the State Council and from the People's Congress, and to some extent he's combining the General Secretary and also the President position and into a super presidency. And but I think that he has already got a lot of setbacks. So even he wants to stay, I think, and many people are going to undercut him, and so he faces sabotage. And my prediction is Xi Jinping wants to stay, but I think he is going to stay for life by changing the rules. Either he's going to create the party chairmanship, or he's going to create, the Russian-style presidency, or he's going to play the same game like Putin did. And when he is the prime minister, he's more powerful. When he is the president, and he's more powerful. So changing from presidential system into a parliamentary system. But one thing I have predicted is Xi Jinping will be the last leader for the Chinese Communist Party, because I really believe and Xi Jinping's final demise will be also simultaneously the demise of the Chinese Communist Party.
So your thoughts on India-China relations in general, and your thoughts on the recent Dockland crisis, for you and for Mr. He Ping.
Okay.
中国和印度很难发生战争。
I don't think there's going to be a war between India and China.
如果是战争的话，互相丢一下石头。
If there is a war, there will be both sides throwing stones at each other rather than anything serious.
I said Tibetan stones will be thrown
Sir?
at each other.
Sorry?
Tibetan stones.
Tibetan stone.
因为对于习近平来讲，他需要“一带一路”来把他的滞销的这个产品到世界各地，也希望把中国的经济实力中国的模式到世界各地去。如果没有印度的支持，如果发生中国和印度的战争，那么他的“一带一路”就会失败。
One simple reason is because Xi Jinping right now, his priority is the One Belt, One Belt, One Road project. And one of the key elements is India, because China wants to use the One Belt, One Road project to sell its products and also spread the China model. If India is not participating in that, all his dreams about building this One Belt, One Road project will be totally wasted.
对于印度来讲，虽然有一些军方有一些民族主义的情绪，但是印度的总理只想一想，全世界都往中国要钱，我为什么不要呢？
Even though in India the politicians are driven by nationalism or some political fervor, but on the other hand, you should remember that if the rest of the world is trying to flock into China to snatch up their markets and their money, and then he will be thinking, why am I staying outside this whole rush?
我觉得中国和印度的竞争就是21世纪最大的竞争。有人说，其实我觉得不是这样。
A lot of people say that the competition between India and China is going to be the main issue facing the world of the 21st century.
印度是民主社会，印度是自由社会，印度是正常的一个发展和增长，所以它没有什么特别的地方。
Since India is a democratic society, its economic growth is just following the regular pattern. I don't think there's anything abnormal about it.
中国的发展的模式是一种灾难。
Well, the China model is quite disastrous, could bring severe consequences.
所以从短期来讲，中国的经济可能会有很大的这个力量，当然把所有的力量都已经消耗光了。
In the short term, there might be the burst of energy for the Chinese economy, but soon when they burn up their resources, I don't think there's any hope of future.
Professor Mingsha.
Yeah, I think India is a gift to our human civilization when the United States is absent in offering the global leadership. To some extent, we can compare today's global situation to the years from 1940 to 1944. And when the democratic world was challenged by communism from the Soviet Union, Nazism from Germany, fascism from Italy, and some other countries like Spain, and also militarism from Japan. And that moment, I think the whole global development was really questioned. But the United States stepped into it to offer global leadership. But today, we can find China, especially through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, has created the axis of evil. And so all authoritarian systems they are in this organization. So you name China, Russia, and the STAN countries, and Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, or Pakistan, Afghanistan, all of them they are in. And because India, of course, does not want to be out of the loop, so India is an observer. But if you look at, for a long time, and we saw the tension between the West versus the East. But today, I think it's China versus the rest. And because if you look at the belt from Japan and to Taiwan, to Indonesia, and to ASEAN countries, and to India, I think all these democratic countries, they are working as frontier countries in alliance and with some Western powers. And I believe this is really God sent or Buddha sent gift for the global civilization. And then the conflict between India and China, I think it did not happen as I predicted. So I previously predicted on a lot of the media, so you could find my discussion on Indian and Chinese border conflict. Also, I believe the Chinese government really, if they were talking about fighting a war from North Korea and to Diaoyu or Takuku Island in the East China Sea, or in Taiwan, or South China Sea, or near India, and so I think they're not really serious about fighting anymore. So this is why I was confident that the Chinese government would not stage war against India, because this could become long haul and exhausting conflict. It would do no help at all for the Chinese economy and for Xi Jinping's leadership.
Thank you.
Questions?
Good afternoon, everyone. I have three questions. Maybe two is related with Professor Shah. You talked about a powerful President Xi Jinping. So Tibetans have the tradition of living on hopes. So we've been talking about, while discussing Tibetan issue, we've been hoping that a powerful Chinese leader, if they are, could have the possibility of resolving Tibetan issue. So if Xi Jinping really becomes powerful and if he succeeded in consolidating power, so do you think a powerful Xi Jinping would be good for Tibet, or will really have the power or the integrity, sincerity to resolve the Tibetan issue? So that's one question. And another thing is that we've been hearing about lots of Chinese students investing in universities all around the world. Mostly the children of CCP leaders, big businessmen and everything. And there are experts who believe that in near future, these young, educated, affluent youths could bring some change in the future leadership. So in the last 1 decade, we have seen a huge number of children, almost 1 million, studying in Western universities. So what are the changes, if there are any, being brought by these young educated youths of Chinese leadership, businessmen. Is there any change that we have seen being created by these young educated exposed youths? Professor Shen, while mentioning about the decline of Chinese system in 2008, you mentioned about certain earthquake.
Also, I forgot Tibetan uprising.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes. I was wondering how.
Yeah.
So
That's the ethnic angle. So this one is all states you can find there.
right. And you also failed to mention about 2009 uprising in Xinjiang and Mongolia.
To some extent, I think 2009 is a repetition of the 2008 Tibetan uprising.
That's it.
Okay, let me quickly talk about. I know from Tibetans there is a hope and about Xi Jinping, and also like the Falun Gong people, they also have had hope about Xi Jinping. I completely disagree, and so I feel this is not the realistic policy. And if I have disagreed with many people, I apologize. But I think it is not, you see, from my judgment, I think it's not realistic. And so this is why I always think, and for the Tibetans, on the one hand, and we should utilize the energy from young people, let them to become a little more pushy, and let them push the envelope a little bit more aggressively. And also because Dalai Lama already has absolved himself from the political leadership, therefore they stay calm and can deal with some so-called dirty politics. And then the second issue with regard to Chinese students studying overseas. What does that mean? For example, in the United States alone, there are about 330,000 students. So I look at the issue from several angles. First, the Chinese elites already they have lost confidence in China's future. So they have moved their assets. What are their most important assets? Their children, right? Then their spouses, and maybe not seriously wives, but their mistresses first, right? Yeah, so this is one of my reading. Second, my reading is, and those children, do they want to go back to China? I think many of them are going to take root in the West. And therefore, every year, if we calculate, if we have 360,000 in the United States alone, every year if they need at least 30,000 to 50,000 US dollars for their tuition and expenses. And maybe the tuition can be more than that, because my daughter, her school is $70,000 a year. So imagine that, what kind of, the drain it is on the Chinese foreign exchange. So the elites are taking advantage to exchange the Chinese renminbi for US dollars. Right? And so this is how they are running away. So this is my reading. And then whether the Chinese young people, they're going to become the agent of change. And of course, because if you just think about the one-child policy, family planning policy, it was rigorously implemented since 1979. So now we have, say, almost two generations, right? They were born, under the one-child policy. So this is why I predicted the Chinese would never fight against the Indians, because Indians, they have enough young soldiers to fight, to kill, to sacrifice. But the Chinese, they have only one child, and they are not going to fight over the Tibetan plateau and for long-term warfare. But the same situation, all these children, and they were brought up in the single child family, so they were the center of the universe, and therefore they developed strong, if they were spoiled, for sure, but they developed strong individuality. And also these two generations, they grew up on the internet. So when the Chinese government is trying to cut off the internet and trying to deprive the individuality, I think the resentment can be strong and also unpredictable. So I think that can be the agent change. And for the students, they studied overseas, they will go back. And if the Chinese economy is still going to maintain their privilege, they are going to be very cooperative. They are going to be the defender for the status quo. But as I said, the status quo is unsustainable. And because I'm making this prediction, and if Mao Zedong, and he rode on the backs of Chinese parents to the power and in Beijing, and then 10 years later, he killed, say, somewhere about 40 million Chinese. Most of them, they were farmers. So I'm predicting after the Chinese Communist Party, they have maintained the stability and for the past almost 4 decades based upon the support of urban Chinese middle class. So the Chinese middle class does not beg, and not like the middle class people in other countries, they become the agency of change and of democratization. One important reason was because the Chinese middle class people, they have been, satisfied. They have been, given the privilege and the cost of many other people. Therefore, they became the strong supporter to the status quo. But what I want to say is, the Chinese people, they think, especially urban Chinese people, because they are my families, right? They are the families of all our colleagues here, and I know they think they have a lot of money because they are living under the influence of wealth effect. Why? Because every house is going to be at a value of millions and even tens and millions of Chinese yuan. So it means my families and their houses in China or even in Shanghai and or in some other secondary cities is more expensive than mine in New York. That's stupid, that's ridiculous, that's crazy. What does that mean? The Chinese economy has developed into a Ponzi scheme. And because the land and real estate based on land, the value was artificially manipulated and inflated by the Chinese government. For this is a Ponzi scheme with Chinese characteristics. Therefore, I think once the Chinese economy is going to go south, and the middle class people, they are going to get into this debt deflation trap. Because they try to, quickly and cash in, or they try to improve their liquidity. That's what the Chinese private entrepreneurs are doing. But once, like Wang Jianli, and he sold, 90% of his holdings, right, of the hotels in China. Once you have the large-scale sales, and then the price is going to crash, and then you are going to see deflation, then you are going to throw more companies into crisis again. So this is why I think, and what's going on is, today China is dealing with the stagflation. Not only you have stagnation, but you have high inflation. But then what's going to happen is the debt deflation cycle. So then, under that circumstances, the Chinese rich people or urban middle class, upper middle class people, they cannot sleep, under all their houses. They need only half bed, and they cannot eat, bite the bricks of their houses. And what's going to happen? Because we know in 1997 Asian financial crisis, in Hong Kong, the people there lost 50% of the value of their houses. And in Indonesia, in Thailand, the currency lost 40 to 60% of the value. So if this scenario is going to happen in China, because in the 2015 stock market crash, and somewhere about 20 to 30 trillion Chinese yuan evaporated. So this is how I think at that moment the Chinese urban, middle and upper class, they are going to be the first victim and under the economic crisis. Because for the farmers, and now they can return to the countryside because they still have a piece of land. What's different today and from what's in 1960s under the Great Famine was in 1960s there was Danwei, the work unit, to supply, to guarantee the urban residents with all kinds of minimum needs. But then the people's commune system became the system to exploit the farmers, to squeeze the resources and from them and to support the urban residents. Therefore, the farmers, they died more. Urban residents, and they survived. But today is different because the people's commune system has collapsed, because the work unit Danwei has also collapsed. Therefore, when the new economic crisis really hits China, there is no institutional system to guarantee the urban residents are going to be protected as the Great Famine. So this is why I really want to warn the Chinese urban middle class and upper middle class people. Look forward, I am concerned for you.
More questions? We have 25 minutes. Oh, no.
Thank you for the insightful talk. My name Chinese Cantonese living. I'm from Boston. I had the honor to listen to you yesterday, so thank you for that. It seems to many, including us, that dialogue is not resuming due to the lack of trust between Beijing and Dharamsala. Or is it a part of Beijing's game plan that Tibet issue will go away with the passing of His Holiness? So my question is open to all two of you.
这是不是一个两位？
我们回答吗？还是夏教授来回答？
夏教授，你回答吗？
我看了大家这个问的问题比较少，是不是我们讲的太糟糕了？还是大家对我们讲的话不敢？可以了。
I don't see a lot of questions. Maybe our talks are so awful, or we were not made ourselves clear.
我觉得这个早几天的开会的时候，我已经讲了，就是在可以近的未来不会有中国大陆和西藏的对话。
As I mentioned a few days ago during our conferences, I don't see any substantial progress made in relating to the dialogues between Beijing and Tibet.
这个情况和这个江泽民的时代和胡锦涛最开始的时代有很大的不同。
This is very different from the period during the Jiang Zemin era or the Hu Jintao era.
那个时候的西藏人表现出强有力的力量，对北京造成了某一种的挑战，尤其是在世界各地。
In those days, the Tibetans around the world, both inside and outside Tibet, they formed a kind of a formidable threat to the Beijing government.
而且市政府要帮提出对西藏的政策和缓的政策以后，这个西藏不断的发生事故，而北京的政府一直没有找到对付西藏的方式。
After Hu Yanbang relaxed his policy in Tibet, and there's been a lot of different issues, a lot of chaos, and Beijing was at a loss of what to do. They never found a reasonable solution.
这个通过谈判几次的谈判，通过中国的经济发展，中国慢慢找到了他们认为的方式。
During the past several decades, because China's economic development and through different dialogues, I think they found some kind of a solution.
他们认为即使是民主的国家，民族的问题也不是那么好解决。
They realized that even in democratic countries, the sovereignty issue, it is a hard issue for everyone to resolve.
在现在的情况之下，他们所采取的是，第一是镇压。
Right now, the only thing they do to me is through tough crackdown.
第二是同化，有更多的这个移民，汉人的移民到这个西藏的地区。
The second one is forced assimilation. They try to move more and more Han people to Tibet.
然后用经济来收买这个西藏的人心，用经济去收买世界上的各个国家。
And then use the economic development as a stimulant or as a incentive to change people's mind and to buy off people, and also to gain support from Western countries.
今天上午我跟达赖喇嘛尊者也讲到一个很糟糕的一个现象，这种现象就是，长期以来，西藏的人只是跟一些虚假的代表或者是统战部的代表谈话，而这些人本身就是这个既得利益者，他們並不想真正解決西藏問題，他們甚至把西藏的問題報告給最高層的時候都是假的情報。
This morning, I discussed a very unique phenomenon with His Holiness, and one of the things we talked about is through the dialogues, we were talking with the Chinese government officials like the United Front Department. And these people, a lot of people working these bureaucracies, they are the beneficiaries of the current status quo. That's why during the dialogues, they may not convey what His Holiness or the Tibetan exiled government, their wishes truthfully to the top leadership.
习近平每天晚上3點鐘還在看文件，但是這些文件都是假的。
Even though we know President Xi Jinping stays up very late at night till 3 o'clock reading different documents submitted by the different departments, But we all know that a lot of the documents were not true, do not contain true information.
怎么把西藏人的真实的想法、达赖喇嘛真正的想法，让这个习近平知道是最重要的。
Right now, we think the priority is to to convey the true thinking of His Holiness or the wills of the people here, and truthfully to the top leadership. That's probably more important.
习近平做出什么样的决策我们还不知道，但是他至少会了解一些真实的情况。当然，现在他了解的情况是假的。
We don't know what Xi Jinping is going to do, but at least I think that it helps when he learns the truth about the exiled government or about Tibet. But right now, what he has learned so far is not true. It's not accurate, at least.
我当然不同意夏教授的观点。
Of course, I don't agree with what Professor Xia has said.
我跟西藏的人一样的，因为我是一个媒体人，必须是在灾难的时候有一点希望。
As a journalist, I feel share the sentiments with the Tibetans because during this very depressing moment, I think we should have hope.
中国的政府可以有暴力，用金钱去收买西藏人，或者是镇压西藏人，但是他失去的不仅仅是西藏的文化，失去的是一种精神。
I think the Chinese government can use force to crack down the Tibetan uprisings or to use money to buy off people's mind. But what they have lost is the true spirits of Tibet and then the Tibetan cultures.
如果中国要在世界上成为一个真正的强国，如果他没有一点精神，他就是没有人真正信服他的。
If China wants to emerge, try to strive to be an economic or superpower in the world, it has to have some kind of spirituality to support itself.
我说我们可以算一下时间，计算是未来的10年和20年，按照他们现在这种速度，也没办法把西藏的文化和精神给摧毁。
If we calculate the time, even in the next 10 or 20 years, I don't think, despite how hard they try, I don't think they're going to be able to eliminate or wipe out Tibetan cultures and the Tibetan spirit.
但是现在习近平他自己都不安全，自己都没有真正掌握权力，所以要寄希望于他马上关心西藏问题，解决西藏问题不太现实，所以短期之内不太有可能出现特别的现象。
Now I come back to what I said at the beginning. At this time, that Xi Jinping himself has not consolidated power. He does not feel very secure himself. So it is not realistic to expect him to make some changes during the short term.
不过有一个好消息是，跟30年以前不同，30年以前的就是世界上没有这么多人了解西藏的文化、西藏的精神，现在全世界了解了，而且呢，很多汉人都开始了解，而且愿意接受和讨论，而且是他们很尊敬西藏的这种文化和精神。
The good news is 30 years before, not so many people know about Tibetans or about Tibet or Tibetan culture. And then during the past 3 decades, we can say the Tibetans have achieved a lot, and then now more and more people know about our causes here. And even a lot of Han Chinese are willing to talk about the issue. They start to respect more about Tibetans and Tibetan cultures.
我可以批评你们一下吗？
Can I criticize you guys a bit?
Please.
Offer a little bit of criticism.
我知道你们现在是讲英文、讲藏文，你们在世界各地也产生了很大的影响。
I know that now you all speak Tibetans and English, and you have achieved great influence all over the world.
但是世界上给我们的、西方给我们的，这是同情和援助，真正需要解决问题的，是跟中国。
But what the rest of the world is giving you here, is sympathy, and there might be some humanitarian aid. But the real, go ahead.
所以我希望你们要花更多的一些时间和精力来关心中国发生的变化。
But the real issue that we have to deal with China, I hope all of you should pay more attention to what is going on in China.
至少要了解它，
At least we should know about that.
不是了解夏教授。
Not understand him, but understand China.
Okay.
结束了没有？
I
thought you bragged about him before he even
you say
finished.
we have this in the disagreements, right? And first, I don't have I do not hold harbor and hope for Xi Jinping. Not because Xi Jinping himself, because Xi Jinping is a product of this political machine or robot, as Heping said. And so this is why I think, and if we now try to hold hope because of him, then we can blame the bureaucratic machinery. I think it is a little bit, inconsistent. And also, even I don't say have hope for Xi Jinping, but does not mean I'm very pessimistic. Because as I said, and because the system is in big trouble, and because two things and Xi Jinping and he tries to do, right? And but he failed miserably. One is he tried to say work out the anti-corruption campaign, but then what's the end result? The end result was Gong Gui is revealing that's the anti-corruption czar, and Wang Qishan is most corrupt, right? And his group is called the so-called group of theft of the whole nation. So this, I think, it is a big failure. And I predict this 4 years ago, so I have to thank this in He Ping, and even he disagreed with my point of view, he published my book. The book, The Empire of the Red Sun. So in that book, I predict the anti-corruption campaign must be a failure. Why? Because there is no micro mechanism to incentivize people, because they do not want people to participate, do not want the news media to participate. They are only relying on the government officials and try to carry out the anti-corruption. So it became a power struggle. So this is why I said it was doomed to a failure. And the second is the economy, right? And Xi Jinping has been proved, and he is a big failure, and in trying to maintain the economic growth rate. And he has no solution, no clue. But he is, as I said, and he is a naked emperor. But many people are saying this to me and said, yes, he is a naked emperor, but he's still an emperor. So this is why many people are respecting him, and because he is an emperor. And many people do not say and then he is naked. That's, I think, how I have a lot of differences with many people, including Henry Kissinger and Henry Paulson and Poppy.
既同意你的观点，也同意基辛格的观点。社会战。
Vote of thanks now.
You have to step up.
Since there's not much questions, so we would like to conclude the session with the word thanks. I take this privilege to thank Mr. Hogan, Professor Misha, and Mr. Hong for your inspiring and for your enlightening talk on Chinese leadership as well as about the forthcoming NCP. And I would also like to thank Wong Kar-leung and our Supreme Justice Commissioner, Wong Kar-tung, our members of Parliament, and all the city staffs who are present over here. And I have two quick announcements also to make. On 16th of October, TPI is hosting a one-day discussion, a half-day discussion in Delhi. And it will be live webcast, since Tibet Online TV will be doing live webcast. So there are very distinguished speakers who are available for the discussion. And for your information, we have one member of parliament from India, who is from the ruling party, and there's one former foreign secretary of India, and we have one China expert, and we have Dr. Lawson Singh, our president, and we have one Chinese scholar, Professor Nisha will also be present. So anyone can observe the webcast right during that day. And on other note, on 24th, we have one full-day conference over here, which will be co-hosted with Chennai Center for Chinese Studies. The full delegation of Chennai Center for Chinese Studies will be coming here, and we'll have a long discussion. So we already got a permission from Krishna. For those who are interested to join from the city staffs, please let us know your name so that it will be included during the session. And before we conclude, I would like to request our director, Wong Kar-leung, to offer Kata as a mark of respect to all the speakers. Thank you so much.
这个